When I first saw the ring, I thought I was hallucinating. It sat perfectly still, glinting under the yellow lamplight, the same platinum band I'd chosen for my husband 5 years ago. It even had the same engraving inside. Forever, M+D. But it wasn't in our home. It was locked inside another woman's safe. Before that day, I thought I understood what forever meant. To me, forever was the quiet hum of our refrigerator late at night while Daniel made his midnight tea. It was the Sunday mornings we spent barefoot in the kitchen, him humming along to old 80s songs while I stirred pancake batter. It was the comfort of knowing that even when things got hard, we'd built something solid, something we could lean on. We'd been married 6 years then. I was 35, Daniel was 38. We weren't perfect, but we were comfortable, or at least I thought we were. He worked in finance, a mid-level manager at a firm downtown. I taught art at a small community centre part-time, just enough to keep my creativity alive and our bills steady. We didn't have children. We said we'd get to it, but the years quietly folded over one another like laundry that never got put away. Still, I never doubted him. Not once. Until the day he came home with his eyes red and shoulders slumped, saying the words that would change everything. They let me go, Maddie. Downsizing. It's done. I remember holding him, my cheek pressed against his damp shirt, whispering how we'd figure it out. And I meant it. I cooked his favourite dinner that night, lemon chicken and garlic rice, and told him maybe it was time to rest, to find something that made him happy again. He smiled at me, tired but soft. "You're too good for me," he said, kissing my forehead. And maybe that's when I should have known. Because when a man starts saying things like that too often, it's rarely gratitude, it's guilt. The next few weeks were quiet, almost tender. He stayed home more, helped with dishes, even joined me at the art centre once or twice, pretending to be interested in the classes. He said he needed time to reset. I didn't push, but slowly the shifts began. His phone was always on silent. He'd step outside for calls from recruiters that lasted too long. He started dressing up again, nice shirts, polished shoes, saying he had networking meetings. And the strangest part, the faint smell of perfume. Not mine. A floral scent, expensive, lingering faintly on his collar when he hugged me goodnight. One evening, as I folded laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans pocket. A boutique hotel. Just one night. He said it was for a friend who needed a favour. I covered it on my card, babe. He laughed it off so easily that I wanted to believe him. I wanted to stay in the soft cocoon of trust we'd built, even if it was starting to tear at the edges. But a small part of me, that quiet, rational part, started keeping track. I noticed he'd begun carrying his laptop everywhere, even to the bathroom. He said it was for job applications. And when I offered to help him polish his resume, he said, "I've got it handled, sweetheart. You don't need to worry." Except I did worry, because his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. The first real clue came a month later. He said he was driving to a job fair in another city. He packed an overnight bag and left before dawn. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about his calmness felt wrong, too practiced, too smooth. The next morning, while watering the plants, I glanced at his work desk. He'd left his planner open. Inside, a small cream-coloured envelope was tucked between the pages. No name, just a hotel logo embossed in gold. Inside the envelope was a receipt. Same hotel name. Different date, just 3 days earlier. 2 breakfasts, 1 bottle of champagne, and a romantic package. My hands shook so badly I could barely put it back. My throat burned, but my mind refused to accept it. When he returned that evening, I pretended nothing was wrong. He was cheerful, whistling as he carried in his overnight bag. "Got some leads," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Things are finally looking up." I nodded, smiled, and kept stirring the soup. But something in me had cracked open. Over the next few weeks, I started watching more closely. I told myself it was just curiosity, not suspicion. I checked his pockets, his emails, his messages when he left his phone unattended. Nothing. He was meticulous, almost too clean. Then, one afternoon, fate decided to intervene. I'd been called to host an art exhibit at a small gallery on the other side of town. Afterward, I stopped by a friend's boutique to drop off some flyers. That's when I saw her. She was standing by the counter, laughing softly with the clerk. Tall, elegant, with the kind of confidence that fills a room. And around her neck, the chain Daniel had once gifted me, the one I'd lost months ago. Our eyes met briefly. She smiled politely, unaware of who I was. But when she gave her name to the cashier, it felt like someone had punched the air out of my chest. Clara Wilkes. I'd heard that name before. Daniel had mentioned her once, casually. A colleague from the firm. Apparently she'd left the company around the same time he lost his job. My pulse pounded. I waited until she left, then asked my friend where Clara worked now. She said Clara had just opened a small marketing firm nearby, and that she was recently divorced. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sound of Daniel's soft snoring beside me. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, but deep down, I already knew. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, I searched his jacket. Inside was a small silver key, one I didn't recognize. Attached to it was a leather tag that read, CW Office. My breath caught. He was careless now. Comfortable. I pocketed the key, my fingers trembling, and told myself I needed proof before my heart believed what my head already knew. The following day, I took the bus to the address on the key tag, a modest building tucked between a florist and a coffee shop. The sign read, Wilkes Creative Studio, Clara's name in cursive gold. I told the receptionist I was there to deliver something for Clara, a portfolio. She smiled and pointed upstairs. She's out for the afternoon. You can leave it in her office. The office was neat, minimal, the faint scent of rose perfume in the air. On her desk sat a sleek black safe, partially open. And that's where I saw it. The ring. Daniel's wedding ring. The one I'd bought with my first teaching bonus. The engraving glimmered faintly under the light. Forever, M+D. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. And for the first time in my marriage, my heart didn't just ache. It shattered, quietly, completely. I don't remember leaving that office. I must have walked out calmly, thanked the receptionist, maybe even smiled, because when I got to the bus stop, no one was staring at me like I'd just come apart. But inside, I was shaking so hard my fingers could barely grip the metal railing. I sat there with that image of the ring burned into my mind. The same ring I'd once slid onto Daniel's finger on our wedding day, my hands trembling from joy back then, not rage. And now, it was sitting in another woman's safe like a trophy. When I got home, Daniel was on the couch watching a documentary, half a beer gone on the table. He looked up and smiled. Hey, babe, how was the gallery thing? I stared at him for a moment too long. He had no idea. No idea that I'd been standing in another woman's office that afternoon staring at the proof of his betrayal. It went fine, I said quietly. He patted the couch beside him. Come sit. You look tired. I sat, and not beside him, but on the armrest, pretending to check my phone. It was then I noticed his hands. Bare. The ring, our ring, was gone. Where's your ring? I asked, voice steady. He glanced down, as if noticing for the first time. Oh, must have left it on the bathroom counter. Been washing the car earlier. He said it so smoothly that for a second I wondered if I'd imagined everything. But then his phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. You left your charger here. He grabbed the phone quickly, thumbed the screen dark and smiled. Spam. I said nothing, because sometimes silence is sharper than any accusation. That night I barely slept. I lay next to him, listening to his breathing, wondering how many lies can fit inside a marriage before it collapses under its own weight. By morning I had made up my mind. If he was lying, I'd find proof. And if he wasn't, then at least I'd know. When he left later that day, I followed. He thought he was meeting an old colleague for lunch. I parked a few blocks down and watched as he walked into a cafe. And there she was. Clara. She stood up when she saw him, smiling in that easy, familiar way. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and sat close. Too close for colleagues. I took a deep breath and forced myself not to cry. I watched them talk, laugh, share bites from the same slice of cake. There was something strangely peaceful about seeing the truth laid bare. It hurt, yes, but it also set something inside me free. They eventually left together, hand in hand, crossing the street like two people who'd forgotten the rest of the world existed. I didn't follow them any further. I didn't need to. The story had already written itself. That evening when he came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The lights were dim. The air smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon. I'd been cooking, though I couldn't remember why anymore. He looked at me, puzzled. "You okay? You look pale." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Sit down, Daniel." He hesitated, then slowly sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking clock filled the silence between us. "Where were you today?" I asked quietly. "Job interview, downtown. At the cafe near Maple Street." His eyes flickered just for a second. "No, different place." "I saw you," I said. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "With Clara?" The colour drained from his face. "Maddie, don't lie. Not now." He swallowed hard, looking down at his hands. For the first time, I saw something like fear in his eyes. Not because he'd been caught, but because I wasn't yelling. I stood, went to the counter, and came back holding something small, the key. I set it on the table between us. "You left this in your jacket." His face went completely still. "I opened the safe." "And?" he whispered. "And I found my ring, the one I bought you, inside her safe." He exhaled shakily, pressing his palms together like a man in prayer. "Maddie, please, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Silence. Finally, he said it. "It started after I lost my job. She was there for me. I didn't mean for it to happen." I stared at him, my heart numb. "You didn't mean for it to happen? You mean you accidentally fell into her bed? Twice? 3 times? "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me, Daniel. What was it like?" He looked broken, small, but I couldn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. "I thought you deserved better than me," he murmured. "After I lost the job, I felt useless. She made me feel wanted." I laughed then, a bitter, quiet laugh that didn't sound like me at all. "So you wanted to feel wanted, and you used our marriage as collateral." He reached out, trying to touch my hand, but I pulled back. "You wore that ring every day," I said softly. "Did it mean anything to you? Even once?" He didn't answer, and in that silence, I knew everything I needed to. The days that followed were a blur. He moved into the guest room until we figured things out. I didn't argue, not because I was hopeful, but because I was done. He tried to apologize. He tried to talk. He even tried to explain that it wasn't love. But betrayal doesn't care about explanations. It just sits inside you like a slow poison, eating away at everything that once felt safe. I stopped cooking for him, stopped asking about his job hunt, stopped waiting for him to come home. Because in truth, he already wasn't home anymore. A week later, Clara called me. Her voice trembled when she introduced herself. "Maddie, I think we should talk." I almost hung up, but curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, not the one where I'd seen them, another one. Neutral ground. She looked nervous, smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept. "I didn't know he was still married," she said, voice shaking. "He told me you were separated, that you wanted different things." I stared at her, searching her face for a lie. But what I saw instead was guilt. Raw, heavy guilt. "He gave me that ring," she whispered. "Said he didn't need it anymore." My stomach turned. "I found it," I said. "In your safe." She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. For the first time, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for her, not entirely, but for the way Daniel had managed to ruin more than one life with his cowardice. We sat in silence for a long while. Then I stood. "Keep the ring," I said quietly. "It's already lost its meaning." And I walked out, into the crisp evening air where everything finally felt real again. When I got home that night, the house was too quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind that hums with peace after a long day, but the hollow, echoing silence that follows something breaking. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. His shoes weren't by the door. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd finally done it. Finally left. And then I saw the note. It was folded neatly on the kitchen counter, next to the half-dead plant I'd been meaning to water for weeks. My name was written on it in his handwriting, that looping, gentle script I'd once found so reassuring. I opened it slowly. "Maddie, I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have left to offer. I never meant to hurt you. I wish I could take it all back. You didn't deserve any of this. Please don't hate me. I'll come by for my things later this week. Take care of yourself. Daniel." No grand confession. No plea for forgiveness. Just a quiet surrender written in ink that had smudged slightly, like maybe he'd cried while writing it. I stood there, staring at the words until they blurred. Not because I wanted him back, but because I finally understood something painful and simple. This was how love ends. Not with shouting, not with doors slamming or accusations flying through the air, but with a note left beside a dying plant and two names that no longer belong together. For days, I moved through the house like a ghost. Every corner of it carried a memory I hadn't asked to remember. The dent in the couch where he used to sit, the coffee mug with his chipped initial, the faint smell of his cologne still clinging to the closet. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the kitchen, rearranged the living room, repainted the walls. But grief doesn't leave just because you redecorate around it. One morning, as I was boxing up some of his things, I found an old photo album. The cover was worn, the spine nearly torn, but inside were fragments of another life. Our wedding, our first apartment, the trip to the mountains where we'd gotten lost and laughed about it for hours. There was one photo that stopped me cold. Daniel and I standing in the rain, drenched but happy, his arms wrapped tightly around me. You could almost see it, the belief that nothing could ever touch us. I sat on the floor for a long time, that photo resting on my lap, wondering where those people had gone. A week passed, then another. He didn't come for his things. He didn't call, didn't text, and somehow that hurt even more, because it meant he wasn't even trying to fix it. So one night I packed everything, the clothes, the books, the remnants of what we used to be, into boxes and left them by the door. The ring, too. I didn't want it anymore. The next morning I drove out to the lake. It was the same place we'd gone on our first anniversary, back when love still felt like a promise instead of a wound. The sky was pale, the water calm. I stood at the edge and opened my palm, the ring gleaming weakly in the light. "You belong to a different life," I whispered. Then I threw it, a clean, sharp flick, and it vanished beneath the surface without a sound. For a second I thought I'd feel empty, but instead I felt something else, a strange, quiet peace. Maybe closure doesn't come from forgiveness. Maybe it comes from finally letting go. A few days later I went back to work. People noticed the change, of course. They asked if I was okay, and I said the same thing every time. I'm getting there. And I was. Slowly, piece by piece. One afternoon, as I was organizing files, my colleague June walked over. "You know," she said gently. You look lighter these days. I smiled. Maybe I am. Later that evening, I stopped by the little bakery near the office and the one Daniel and I used to visit on Sundays. For the first time, I walked in alone. Ordered the same slice of lemon cake we used to share. It tasted different, not better, not worse. Just mine. And I realized something small but powerful. He'd taken a lot from me, yes, but not everything, not the part of me that still believed in starting over. Months passed, the seasons changed, and so did I. The house that once felt haunted began to feel like mine again. I bought new curtains, moved the furniture, painted the walls in warm colours. Little by little, I built a new rhythm, one that didn't revolve around waiting for someone to come home. Sometimes, I still thought about him. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant sadness, like remembering a story you once loved, before it turned bitter halfway through. Then one morning, as I was watering that same half-dead plant, now thriving again, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. He looked thinner, older. His eyes were tired, like a man who'd been carrying too much for too long. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," I replied. For a moment, neither of us moved. He glanced past me into the house that used to be his. "Looks different," he said softly. "It is." He nodded, shifting awkwardly. "I came for the boxes." "They're in the garage." He nodded again, then hesitated. "You look good, Maddie." I smiled faintly. "I am good." There it was, the truth. Simple, steady, and whole. For the first time in a long while, I actually meant it. He took a deep breath, eyes glistening. "I'm glad," he said. And I believed him. He turned to go, but just before he reached the car, I called out, "Daniel?" He stopped, looked back. "Take care of yourself," I said. He nodded. "You too." And just like that, he was gone. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I didn't feel hollow or angry or lost. I just stood there, breathing, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive all at once with fireworks or closure. It just seeps quietly into your life, until one day you realize you've survived what was meant to break you. I looked around my home, at the light spilling through the windows, at the plant now blooming beside the note I never threw away, and I whispered, almost to myself, "I'm still here." The morning after Daniel came for his things, I woke up before dawn. For months I had dreaded waking. The quiet before the day began was always the hardest part. But that morning felt different. The light filtering through the curtains was softer, gentler somehow, like the world itself was giving me permission to start over. I made coffee. Black, just the way I used to like it before Daniel started buying all those flavoured creamers. I stood by the window, cup in hand, watching the first few rays of sunlight stretch across the backyard. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I still had. Peace. Silence. Myself. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But for a long time, I'd forgotten what that felt like. A few weeks later, I took a walk around the lake, the same one where I'd thrown the ring. The water was calm that day, mirroring the sky so perfectly it looked like a sheet of glass. I found the same spot and sat there, breathing in the smell of wet earth and pine. A family was having a picnic nearby, a little girl chasing a butterfly, her laughter echoing across the water. I smiled, remembering how once that sound would have broken me. Now it reminded me that life moves on, with or without us. It was in that quiet moment I realized something profound. Love doesn't end when a person leaves. It ends when you stop recognizing yourself in the shadow they left behind. And I was done being a shadow. I started small, signed up for a pottery class at the community centre, started volunteering at the local library on weekends, picked up my camera again, the one I'd put away after our honeymoon. I took photos of everything: the old man who fed birds at the park, the rain on my window, the woman who danced barefoot at the farmer's market. Each picture felt like a tiny piece of myself coming back. Sometimes healing looks like rediscovering the things that once made you you. About a month later, I ran into someone at the coffee shop. His name was Lucas, a teacher at the elementary school nearby. We talked briefly while waiting for our drinks. He had that kind of warmth in his voice that makes people lean in when he speaks. I didn't think much of it at first, but a week later, I saw him again. Same place, same time. He smiled. "Are you following me, or is the universe trying to tell me something?" I laughed. It felt good to laugh. Not the polite kind, the real, belly-deep kind I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. He asked if I wanted to join him at his table, and I did. We talked for an hour about everything and nothing: books, travel, how both of us preferred rainy mornings. When he asked for my number, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to give it, but because for the first time, I wanted to give it when I was ready, not when I was lonely. So I smiled and said, "Maybe next time." And there was something empowering in that, in knowing I had a choice again. Life didn't turn perfect overnight. There were still days when I missed the comfort of what used to be, and nights when old memories crept in like ghosts. But grief softened. Pain became a teacher instead of a punishment. And I learned to stop measuring my worth by the way someone else treated me. A few months later, I found out through a mutual friend that Daniel had moved to another city. He'd tried making things work with the woman from the safe, but it hadn't lasted. I didn't feel satisfaction or pity, just a quiet sense of understanding. People break each other when they're broken themselves, and maybe that's what we both were. Two broken people who mistook need for love. That realization didn't excuse what he did, but it freed me from carrying his guilt any longer. One evening, I visited my parents for dinner. My mother, who'd watched me crumble and rebuild myself, looked at me across the table and said softly, "You look happy, Maddie." I smiled. "I think I finally am." She reached over, squeezing my hand. It takes courage to walk away from someone you love, but it takes even more to walk back into your own life afterward. I'll never forget that. Because she was right. Later that night, back home, I opened my journal and wrote a single line across a fresh page. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering without pain. And I think that's what I'd been trying to do all along. Remember without breaking. Months turned into a year. The lake changed with the seasons, summer green to autumn gold to winter grey, but I kept going back. It became my ritual, to sit there, to breathe, to thank the version of me that had survived. One spring afternoon, I noticed something sparkling near the edge of the water. I walked closer and laughed when I realized what it was. A simple silver ring half buried in the sand. Not the ring, of course. Just someone else's lost token of love. Still, it felt poetic somehow, as if the universe was reminding me how everything we lose eventually returns in another form. I picked it up, brushed off the sand and placed it on a rock near the water. "Someone else might still need you," I whispered. Then I walked away, lighter, freer, and finally whole. That night I stood by the window again, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The same view that once made me feel small now felt infinite. Because I knew, no matter what came next, I'd never lose myself again for love. And if anyone asked me what I'd learned from it all, I'd say this: sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying, it's leaving. Leaving behind the lies, the guilt, the version of yourself that believed you weren't enough. You don't always get justice. You don't always get closure. But you do get to start again. And that's enough. When I look back now, it almost feels like watching a film of someone else's life. The woman I was back then, scared, confused, desperate to understand why the person she trusted most could betray her. She's still a part of me. But she's softer now, wiser. I think every one of us carries a story like this, in one form or another. A story of being deceived or left behind, or realizing that love can sometimes wound deeper than hate ever could. But I've learned something that I wish someone had told me sooner. You can survive heartbreak without losing your heart. When Daniel lied, I thought he'd stolen my future. But the truth is, he only freed me from a version of my life that no longer fit. The version where I kept giving, hoping he'd see my worth, instead of learning to see it myself. Now, when I walk past couples holding hands, I don't feel bitterness. I just hope they're honest with each other. Because lies rot the foundation of love from the inside out, quietly, slowly, until there's nothing left to stand on. And if you're listening to my story tonight, and maybe you've been where I was, maybe you're standing at the edge of a truth that's about to change everything. If that's you, breathe. You'll get through it. You'll find yourself again in the quiet moments, in the small joys, in the mirror one morning when you realize you no longer ache the same way. Because that's what healing really is. Not forgetting the pain, but remembering your strength. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments below, and remember, no matter what they take from you, never let them take your peace.